Emma Carter thought she knew her place in the world, a small farm, a hard-working life, and the love of the only mother she had ever known. But when her adoptive mother, Linda, reveals a shocking secret about Emma's true lineage and a fortune at risk, everything changes. As the tangled web of betrayal and lies unravels, Emma discovers that her father's mysterious death wasn't an accident, it was murder, orchestrated by the people closest to her. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any exciting stories like this one. Here, each video is a journey of overcoming and emotion that you won't want to miss. Emma Carter sat by the window of her small, weathered farmhouse, her eyes tracing the horizon where the golden fields of wheat met the fading sun. She had spent her entire life here, working alongside her adoptive mother, Linda, tending to the farm with grit and determination. The wind carried the scent of earth and hay, familiar and comforting, as it always had been. But today, everything felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, a tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the house. "Emma, we need to talk," Linda's voice broke through the stillness, sharp as ever. Emma turned to find her standing at the door, her expression unreadable, but there was something unsettling in the way she held herself. Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What is it, Mom?" Emma asked, trying to hide the unease in her voice. She had learned to stay on guard around Linda, especially lately. Over the past few weeks, her adoptive mother had grown more distant, more mysterious, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Linda hesitated for a moment before stepping into the room, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. She closed the door behind her and took a deep breath, as if choosing her words carefully. "Emma, I haven't been entirely honest with you," Linda began. Her voice wavered just slightly, but Emma didn't let her guard down. She had heard Linda say that before, only to reveal nothing more than vague half-truths and manipulations. "What do you mean?" Emma's brow furrowed. Linda took a step closer, her eyes locking with Emma's, and for the first time in years, Emma saw something resembling vulnerability in her mother's face. It was fleeting, but it was there. "Emma, you were adopted," Linda said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma froze. Her breath caught in her throat, as if the words themselves had hit her like a physical blow. Adopted? She had never suspected, never even imagined such a thing. Her mind raced, trying to comprehend what Linda was saying. "No," Emma finally managed to say, her voice trembling. "That's not possible. You're my mother. You've always been my mother." "I know this is a shock," Linda continued, her tone softening, but Emma could see the determination in her eyes. "But it's true. Your real family, they're not the people you think they are. And they left something behind. Something that now belongs to you." "Something?" Emma's voice was a mix of confusion and disbelief. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Linda paused, her gaze shifting toward the window, as though searching for the right words. Then she spoke again, her voice taking on a more urgent tone. "Your biological family, they were wealthy. Very wealthy. And their fortune, the inheritance, it's at risk. I've been trying to protect it, but I can't do it alone. I need you to step up, Emma." Emma blinked, her heart pounding in her chest. She had always known there was something unusual about Linda's obsession with money, with status, but she had never imagined it would lead to this. A family fortune? Inheritance? She had always thought of herself as the daughter of Linda Carter, poor, hard-working, but content. She never imagined there was more to her story. "I don't understand," Emma whispered, her mind reeling. "You don't have to understand everything right now," Linda replied quickly. "But you need to sign these papers, Emma. It's the only way to secure your inheritance, to make sure it doesn't slip away." Linda handed Emma a stack of documents, their edges sharp and intimidating, but Emma couldn't bring herself to take them. Her hands shook as she glanced down at the papers, her head spinning with confusion and disbelief. "I don't want this," Emma said, her voice firm now. "I don't know these people. I don't want their money." Linda's face darkened, and she took a step forward, her tone more forceful. "You don't have a choice, Emma. You need to accept this, or everything we've worked for will be lost. The farm, the land, it's all tied to this inheritance. We need it, and we need it now." Emma recoiled, feeling her heart race. The desperation in Linda's voice was palpable, and something about it didn't sit right with her. For years, Linda had pushed Emma to work harder, to sacrifice more, all for the sake of keeping the farm afloat. But now, it was about something much bigger. "Why are you telling me this now?" Emma asked, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't want you to know," Linda interrupted, her eyes hardening. "I didn't want you to know that you were part of something much bigger than this farm. But now it's too late. I can't protect it anymore. You need to take control." Emma stood there, frozen, her thoughts swirling in a whirlwind of questions. Why hadn't Linda told her the truth before? What was really at stake here? And why was Linda pushing so hard for Emma to accept this inheritance? She glanced down at the papers again. The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest, but a deeper feeling began to stir in her, one of distrust. She didn't know these people. She didn't want their money. Not like this. "I need time," Emma finally said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "I can't just sign these." Linda's expression darkened, the desperation returning. "You don't have time, Emma. You don't understand how serious this is." But Emma was already walking toward the door, the weight of the truth settling in. Something wasn't right, and she wasn't going to let Linda control her any longer. "I'll figure this out," Emma said, her voice cold now. "But I'm not signing anything today." As Emma stepped out into the cool evening air, her mind raced with questions, but one thing was certain, her life was about to change forever. She needed answers. And she wasn't going to let Linda, or anyone, manipulate her into accepting a fate she didn't understand. The days following Linda's revelation were a blur of confusion and sleepless nights. Emma could barely focus on the daily chores at the farm, feeding the chickens, mending the fences, collecting eggs. Her mind kept replaying the conversation, Linda's words echoing in her head, each one carrying more weight than the last. "Your real family, they were wealthy. Very wealthy." The thought seemed absurd. Wealth had never been a part of Emma's life, and she couldn't wrap her mind around what Linda had said. Her fingers itched to take the stack of papers that Linda had given her and burn them. But deep down, Emma knew it wasn't that simple. There were too many unanswered questions, too many things Linda hadn't told her. "Why now? Why hadn't you told me sooner?" Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Linda was hiding something darker. And as much as she wanted to dismiss everything, something inside her stirred. The inheritance, the family secrets, Emma needed to understand what was at stake. That night, after another long day of work, Emma sat at the kitchen table with the papers spread out before her. She didn't want to look at them, didn't want to think about the strange inheritance that Linda was so desperate to secure. But she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this was something she couldn't escape. She was about to shove the papers into a drawer when a knock at the door startled her. Emma hesitated, glancing at the papers one more time before walking over to the door. "Emma?" A familiar voice called through the crack. She opened it to find Michael standing on the other side, his tall frame outlined by the moonlight. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, his brow furrowed in concern. Emma's heart skipped a beat, both from relief and from the unresolved tension between them. They had grown up together, shared everything from scraped knees to childhood dreams, but lately, their bond had felt strained. She had distanced herself from him, unsure of what to say, unsure if she could trust anyone right now. "Michael," she said quietly, stepping aside to let him in. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft but worried as he entered. He had always been able to read her better than anyone. "I've been trying to reach you for days." Emma closed the door behind him, not knowing where to start. She had been avoiding him for a reason. Michael was the last person she wanted to drag into this mess. But she couldn't keep it to herself any longer. "Sit down," Emma said, gesturing to the worn kitchen table. "I need to talk to you." Michael nodded, sitting down across from her, his eyes scanning the papers on the table. "What's this? I thought you said you didn't want anything to do with that inheritance thing." Emma bit her lip, gathering her thoughts. She wanted to tell him everything, but she wasn't sure where to begin. So much had happened in such a short time, and she could hardly make sense of it herself. "Linda, she told me something," Emma began, her voice trembling slightly. "She said I'm adopted. That my biological family was rich, and that the inheritance, it's at risk." Michael's eyes widened in shock. "Wait, what? You're adopted?" Emma nodded, trying to keep her emotions in check. "Yeah. I don't know what to believe anymore, Michael. I don't know why she's telling me this now, but something feels wrong. I don't trust her." Michael leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "You're right not to trust her. I don't know what's going on, but this is all too weird." Emma hesitated, then pushed the papers toward him. "She wants me to sign these. She says it's the only way to protect the inheritance, but I don't even know who these people are. I don't want their money, Michael. I don't want any of it." Michael took the papers and skimmed through them. His face grew more serious with each page he turned. "This is a lot of legal stuff. It looks like she's trying to transfer the assets to you." "I know," Emma said bitterly. "But I don't even know if this inheritance is real. And if it is, why the hell would she want me to take it now? After all these years? Why not when I was a kid?" Michael's eyes met hers. "She's hiding something. You don't just suddenly start talking about a massive inheritance out of nowhere." The weight of his words hit Emma hard. She had been trying to ignore the possibility that Linda might be hiding something, but deep down, she knew he was right. Linda wasn't acting like herself, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being manipulated. "She keeps saying the farm will be lost if I don't act fast," Emma continued, her voice trembling. "But I don't know if I can trust her. I don't even know what's true anymore." Michael looked at her with a mix of sympathy and concern. "Whatever's going on, you don't have to go through it alone. Let's figure this out together." Emma smiled weakly, grateful for his support. But even with Michael by her side, she couldn't shake the growing suspicion that Linda was hiding something far more dangerous. Over the next few days, Emma and Michael began to dig deeper into the mystery. They pored over old documents, trying to find any trace of Emma's biological family. But everything they found led them to more questions. The name Carter didn't appear anywhere. No family records, no indication of a rich inheritance. Then, one evening, as Emma was going through an old photo album she had found hidden in the attic, a small, faded envelope fell out from between the pages. Inside was a letter, written in an elegant script that seemed too old-fashioned to be from the time she had known Linda. The letter was addressed to John Carter. Her heart skipped. She recognized the name. It was the name of her biological father. And just below the letter, in tiny print, was a phrase that made her blood run cold: "I've taken care of everything." Taken care of everything? Emma muttered under her breath, her hands trembling as she read the note again. Something was definitely wrong, and Emma knew that Linda's involvement went much deeper than she had imagined. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. But just as Emma began to formulate a plan, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She picked it up, glancing at the screen. It was from Linda. We need to talk. Now. Emma stared at the message on her phone, her stomach tightening. We need to talk. Now. The words felt like a command, not a request. She could almost hear Linda's cold, calculating tone through the text. It was as if Linda had sensed her resistance growing stronger, and now, she was determined to force her hand. I think she's on to us, Michael said, his voice low as he looked over her shoulder at the phone. She's probably been watching you. Emma didn't reply immediately. She was too busy processing the implications of Linda's sudden urgency. The woman who had raised her, the woman who had always been a distant figure in her life, was now at the center of a web of lies and manipulation, and Emma had no idea how deep it ran. What do you think she wants? Emma finally asked, still feeling a sense of dread creeping up her spine. She had never felt this uncertain, this cornered, in her entire life. Michael shrugged, his face tense. It could be anything. But I'm guessing it has to do with the inheritance. She's been pushing you to sign those papers for days. Emma clenched her fists, her mind racing with all the possibilities. She had already decided that she wasn't going to sign anything without understanding what was really going on. But Linda wasn't the type to let things go. She would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. I'm not going to meet her alone, Emma said decisively. You'll come with me. Michael hesitated but then nodded. Of course. But whatever happens, we need to stay calm. We can't let her manipulate us again. With a deep breath, Emma sent a quick reply to Linda. I'll be there. But I need answers. An hour later, Emma and Michael arrived at Linda's house. The once pristine white cottage stood eerily silent, the wind rustling through the trees surrounding the property. It was strange to think that this was where she had spent so much of her childhood, a place that had always felt like home. Now, it felt cold and unfamiliar. As they stepped inside, Emma was hit with the familiar scent of lavender and citrus that Linda favored. But there was something different about the house now, a tension that hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Linda was already waiting for them in the living room, her posture straight, her eyes sharp. Her usual composed demeanor was gone, replaced with something more dangerous. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, watching them with an intensity that sent a shiver down Emma's spine. Sit down, Linda finally said, gesturing to the couch. Emma didn't move. I want to know what's going on, Linda. Why are you pushing me so hard to accept this inheritance? What's really at stake here? Linda's lips curled into a tight smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She took a seat across from them, crossing her legs as though the conversation was nothing more than an inconvenience. Emma, you don't understand. This isn't just about you. This is about securing your future, the future of this farm. And more than that, it's about making sure that everything your real family left behind doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Emma clenched her jaw. My real family? She asked, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. Who are they, Linda? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Linda's eyes flickered, and Emma saw something almost imperceptible, that made her heart race. It was fear. Your family is complicated, Linda said, her voice lower now. But the truth is, Emma, you were always meant to inherit this. I was protecting you. I was protecting all of us. She leaned forward, her eyes locking with Emma's. But if you don't sign those papers soon, everything will be lost. We'll lose the farm, the money, the future that your family worked so hard to build. Emma's eyes narrowed. She had heard this all before, the same rehearsed lines, the same manipulation. Linda was trying to make her feel guilty, trying to make her believe that she was the only one who could save them all. But Emma wasn't buying it. I don't believe you, Emma said, her voice firm. Something is off, and I'm not going to sign anything until I know exactly what I'm getting myself into. I need the truth. Linda's face darkened, and the air in the room seemed to crackle with tension. For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. Then, in a voice so cold that it made Emma shiver, Linda spoke. "Do you think you can handle the truth, Emma? Do you really want to know what happened to your father?" Emma's breath caught in her throat. "My father? You're telling me you know what happened to him?" Linda leaned back, her fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. "I know exactly what happened to him," she said, her eyes glinting with something dangerous. "And I know you're not ready to hear it." Michael stepped forward, his tone hard. "Tell her, Linda. Now." For a moment, Linda seemed to hesitate, as if weighing the consequences of revealing everything. Then, as though she had made a decision, she spoke again, her voice colder than before. "Your father, John Carter, didn't die from some tragic accident, Emma. He was murdered." Her words hung in the air, the weight of them pressing down on Emma's chest. "Slowly poisoned by someone he trusted. Someone who wanted everything he had." Emma's mind went blank. Murdered? Her father? She had never, not in a million years, considered the possibility. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Linda's eyes glimmered with satisfaction. "The inheritance, the farm, it's all part of a larger game, Emma. And your father was a pawn. You're a pawn. But you can change that. You can finally take control. All you have to do is trust me." But Emma couldn't. Her world was spinning, and the truth, if it could even be called the truth, was more twisted than anything she could have imagined. She had thought that Linda's manipulation was just about money. But now, it was about something far darker, far more dangerous. "I can't trust you anymore," Emma said, standing up, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "I don't know who you really are." Linda's smile didn't falter, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, something dangerous, something desperate. "You will, Emma. You'll understand soon enough. But by then, it may be too late." The night air was cold as Emma and Michael walked away from Linda's house, the weight of Linda's words pressing down on them. Emma's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts: murder, betrayal, the inheritance that she never wanted. But more than anything, she couldn't shake the image of Linda's cold, calculating smile. It was clear now that Linda wasn't just trying to protect the farm. She had been hiding something far darker, and Emma had no idea what that something was. "Emma, we need to figure this out," Michael said, his voice low as they walked side by side down the dirt path that led back to Emma's farm. "We can't just let her control everything like this." Emma nodded, her thoughts spinning. "But how do we even begin? She's been lying to me for years. How do we know what's real?" "I think it's time we dig into your father's past," Michael suggested, his expression serious. "There's got to be something there. A record, a connection, something that can tell us who he really was and what happened to him." Emma stopped in her tracks, a sudden idea forming in her mind. Sarah. John's secretary. She might know something. Michael raised an eyebrow. "Sarah? You think she'll talk?" Emma bit her lip, considering it. "She always seemed loyal to my father. If there's anyone who might know the truth, it's her. We should go see her. We don't have much time." The next morning, they drove to Sarah's small, modest house on the outskirts of town. It was a far cry from the wealth that Linda had alluded to, but Emma knew that Sarah wasn't just any ordinary person. She had worked with her father for years, and if anyone could shed light on the strange circumstances of his death, it was Sarah. When they arrived, Sarah greeted them with a surprised, yet warm smile. "Emma, Michael, what brings you by?" "We need to talk," Emma said, her voice steady but urgent. "It's about my father, John. I need to know what happened to him." Sarah's face immediately changed, her smile faltering. She glanced over her shoulder, almost as if making sure no one else was listening. "Come inside," she said quickly, ushering them into the house. Once inside, Sarah motioned for them to sit. Her home was small, cozy, but there was an unease in the air. She was clearly hiding something. The question was, what? "Sarah, we know what Linda said." "About my father being murdered," Emma began, watching her closely. "Is it true?" Sarah's face went pale. She swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she sat down across from them. "Linda, she's telling you the truth. Your father was murdered. But the story is much more complicated than she's letting on." Emma felt her heart race. "Tell me everything." Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes looking distant as she gathered her thoughts. "Your father was a good man, Emma. He was ambitious, but he also had a good heart. He was trying to protect you, and your future, even when he knew something was wrong. The people he was involved with, they weren't what they seemed. Your father had enemies, powerful ones. Linda knew this." Emma's eyes widened. Linda knew? How? She always acted like she was just helping him. Sarah nodded, her voice growing quieter. "Linda was always involved, but not in the way you think. She wasn't just his wife, she was his accomplice. She played a much bigger role than you can imagine. Your father's death wasn't just about money, it was about control. Control of his fortune, control of everything he built. Linda wanted it all. And she was willing to do anything to get it." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying, Sarah? Are you saying Linda killed him?" Sarah hesitated for a long moment, her eyes filled with a sorrowful truth. "Yes. She poisoned him, Emma. Slowly, over time. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't some sudden illness. It was deliberate. She wanted him out of the way, so she could take everything for herself. She's been planning this for years." Emma felt as though the ground beneath her was giving way. Everything she thought she knew about her life, about Linda, was falling apart. Linda, her mother, the only mother she had ever known, had been involved in her father's death. And now she was trying to control Emma's future, to make her sign away everything. "But why didn't you stop her, Sarah?" Michael asked, his voice full of disbelief. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Sarah's eyes filled with regret. "I tried. I did everything I could to protect your father. But Linda, she had the power. She had connections. She made sure no one could touch her. Your father knew it was only a matter of time before she would make her move. That's why he kept records. Documents. Things that could prove everything. But they were hidden. He didn't want you to be part of it. He wanted you to have a chance at a normal life. Where are the records?" Emma demanded, leaning forward. "Do you know where they are? The proof that Linda killed him?" Sarah stood up, her hands shaking. She walked over to a small bookshelf and pulled out a dusty old box, the kind that was kept hidden away from view. She opened it carefully and pulled out a stack of papers, all yellowed with age. "These are the records your father kept," Sarah said, her voice quiet but resolute. "He knew what Linda was capable of. He knew he couldn't trust her, and he knew she was plotting to take everything. These documents are the key to everything, everything she's been hiding. You need to take them. Now." Emma reached for the papers, her hands trembling as she sorted through the stack. As she flipped through the documents, one letter stood out to her. It was addressed to Emma Carter, and it was dated just a few months before her father's death. The letter contained instructions for Emma to find these records and expose Linda for the murderer she was. This is it," Emma whispered. "This is the truth." Sarah nodded, her face filled with an expression of guilt. "Your father wanted you to have the chance to live your life, Emma. But now that you know the truth, you have to make a choice. You can't let Linda win. She's too dangerous. She'll stop at nothing. Emma felt the weight of the documents in her hands, the burden of the truth heavy in her chest. But now, she knew what had to be done. She had to face Linda. She had to confront the woman who had destroyed her family and made her life a lie. "Thank you, Sarah," Emma said quietly, her voice filled with determination. "I'll take care of it." The drive back to the farm felt like the longest one of Emma's life. The documents Sarah had given her weighed heavily in her lap, a physical manifestation of everything she had just learned. Linda had murdered her father. Slowly, methodically, over the course of months, and for reasons Emma still didn't fully understand. But now, with the letter Emma had found, she knew she had the power to expose Linda. She wasn't going to let Linda get away with it. She wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. Yet, even as Emma held the stack of damning documents, doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. Something wasn't right. There had to be more to the story. The way Linda had acted during their confrontation, the coldness in her eyes, the way she had so casually admitted to John Carter's murder, Emma had the nagging feeling that Linda wasn't the only person behind this. "I can't believe it," Michael said, breaking the silence. His voice was tight with anger, and Emma could hear the disbelief in it. "Your father, murdered by Linda. And she's still trying to manipulate you. She's been lying to you your whole life, Emma. For years." "I know," Emma whispered. "But there's something about this that doesn't sit right with me. It's too easy. It feels like she's just the tip of the iceberg." Michael looked at her, his expression confused. "What do you mean?" "We have everything we need. She killed him. We have the documents. We can go to the police right now, Emma. We can end this." Emma shook her head. "It's not just about Linda. She's not the only one pulling the strings here." Michael frowned, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "What are you saying?" Emma's heart was racing now. She needed to say it out loud, needed to tell him what had been eating at her since they left Sarah's house. "Michael, there's something you don't know. There's someone else involved in this. Someone close to us." She paused, her voice faltering. "Someone who's been working with Linda all along." Michael's face darkened. "Who?" The name hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to go off. "Your father." For a long moment, Michael didn't say anything. The silence in the car was suffocating. Then, with a low, almost inaudible breath, Michael spoke. "What did you just say?" "Your father, Gregory. He was working with Linda. He knew about the poisoning. He helped her cover it up. He was part of the plan." Michael slammed his hand against the steering wheel, the sound echoing in the small car. "No. You're wrong, Emma. My father would never." "He did," Emma interrupted, her voice trembling with the weight of the revelation. "I found something. I found a letter, from him. It's not just about the inheritance, Michael. It's about control. Your father and Linda, they've been plotting together for years. I don't know how far this goes, but I know that your father's hands are just as dirty as Linda's." Michael's face turned pale, his eyes wide in disbelief. "You're telling me, my father was involved in this too?" Emma nodded, her heart aching for him. "Yes. I'm so sorry, Michael. I know this is hard to hear. But we can't ignore it anymore. We need to face it." Michael remained silent for a moment, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. "I don't want to believe it. But if you're right. If my father really was involved, what do we do now?" Emma's mind raced. She had already come so far, uncovered so much. But now, the stakes were even higher. Linda wasn't just a threat, she was part of a much larger web of lies. And the deeper Emma dug, the more dangerous it became. "We confront them both," Emma said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We take everything to the authorities. We expose Linda and your father. We can't let them get away with this." Michael turned the car onto the familiar dirt road that led to the farm, his expression still a mixture of disbelief and rage. "And if they don't go down quietly? We'll be ready for whatever they throw at us," Emma said, her voice hardening. "I won't let them destroy what's left of my family. And neither will you." Back at the farm, the weight of the discovery was suffocating. Emma sat at the kitchen table, her fingers brushing over the documents that had been hidden away for so long. She couldn't believe what she was about to do. The truth was out there, in black and white, but now she was staring down the most difficult decision of her life. The people she trusted most, her adoptive mother, the woman who had raised her, and Michael's father, the man who had been like a second father to her, were all part of a conspiracy that had destroyed her family. Michael sat across from her, his face pale and his hands shaking as he held the letter from his father. The weight of their combined betrayal hung over them both. "We have everything we need to take them down," Michael said, his voice grim. "But you're sure about this, Emma? You're sure that we can go through with it?" Emma took a deep breath, her gaze steady. "I'm sure. It's the only way to end this." But just as they were about to make their next move, a knock at the door shattered the silence. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea who it could be, but she knew one thing for sure: the people they were up against had never been predictable. Michael stood up, his hand hovering near the door handle. "Stay back," he warned, his voice low. Emma nodded, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. She reached for the documents again, her fingers curling around the edges as though they were her only protection. When Michael opened the door, he froze. Emma's pulse quickened as she watched his face drain of color. Standing in the doorway was none other than Linda, and behind her, Michael's father, Gregory. "We need to talk," Linda said, her voice smooth but cold. "And I think it's time you both understood how far this goes." Emma's heart pounded in her chest as Linda and Gregory stepped into the house, their faces masks of calm determination. The air around them was thick with the weight of what they had just revealed, what they had done. The truth, or at least a version of it, had come to light, but Emma knew that it was still only a fraction of the whole story. And now, the stakes were higher than ever. Michael stood frozen at the door, his body tense, his eyes locked on his father. He had never looked at Gregory this way before, not with the cold, calculating suspicion that he felt now. His father, the man who had been a steady, reliable figure in his life, now stood before him as one of the masterminds of his greatest betrayal. "You're here," Emma said, her voice steady despite the fury and disbelief that churned inside her. She took a deep breath, focusing on the moment. This was it. She had to confront them both, now, before they could manipulate the situation any further. Gregory's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course we're here, Emma. We've been waiting for you to put the pieces together." Linda, standing slightly behind Gregory, gave a sharp, calculating glance at Emma, her eyes full of something that was almost pity. "You're smarter than I thought, Emma. I knew you'd figure it out eventually. But I didn't think you'd be this persistent." Emma's stomach churned at her words, the truth sinking in with an almost suffocating heaviness. It wasn't just Linda who had been orchestrating things from the shadows. Gregory, too, had played a part in destroying her family. Michael stepped forward, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "I can't believe this. All these years, you've been lying to me, to Emma, to everyone. How could you do this?" Gregory's eyes flicked to his son with a trace of something like amusement. "I did what I had to do, Michael. You've always been so naive, so trusting. But that's not going to help you now. What is this about?" Emma demanded, her voice sharp. What's really going on? You killed my father, and now you're trying to control me, control everything I've ever known. Why? Linda crossed her arms over her chest, her expression turning more defensive, more calculating. It's simple, Emma. We did it because we had to. Your father and I had an agreement. He promised me that the inheritance would stay in the family. He promised me control over everything. But then he started getting sentimental. He was going to cut me out of the picture. He was going to make sure you had everything, and that wasn't part of the plan. Emma's mind raced, her stomach churning as Linda's words hit her with brutal clarity. You poisoned him slowly? She asked, her voice barely a whisper, disbelief mingling with the bitter taste of betrayal. You killed him because he was trying to do the right thing? Gregory gave a small, grim nod. Yes. Your father didn't realize the danger he was in. He thought he could protect you by keeping everything from me, but he underestimated me. We had to make sure everything stayed in our control. And now, here we are. The farm, the inheritance, it's all part of the legacy. You're a piece in this game, Emma. A pawn. Michael's face went pale, the words cutting through him like a knife. You knew, Dad? You knew everything and still went along with it? Gregory didn't look guilty, not at all. If anything, he looked almost detached, as though it were all a business deal gone wrong. You have to understand, Michael. There's nothing personal about this. It was about survival. About securing what was ours. Emma felt the anger bubbling up inside her, but she couldn't let it consume her, not yet. You're both criminals, she said through gritted teeth. You're both responsible for my father's death, for everything that's happened. And I'm not going to let you get away with it. Linda stepped forward, her eyes cold. And what are you going to do about it, Emma? You think you can take us down with a few pieces of paper? You think anyone will believe you? You've already lost, darling. You're in too deep. The farm is mine now. The inheritance is mine. Emma's hands clenched into fists. She was trembling with rage, but she couldn't back down now. She had come too far. You're wrong, she said, her voice firm. I have proof. I have everything I need to bring you both down. Gregory chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. Do you? You think those documents will be enough to convince anyone? You don't know what you're up against. We've covered our tracks, Emma. There's no one who can help you. But Emma wasn't listening anymore. The fear, the doubt, the confusion, everything that had paralyzed her for weeks, began to fall away. She was finally seeing the full picture, and it wasn't just about the farm. It wasn't just about money or power. It was about survival, about control, about who would come out on top in the end. Linda and Gregory had been playing this game for years, and Emma had just been a pawn in their twisted plot. But no longer. I know exactly who I'm up against, Emma said, her voice hardening with determination. And I'm not going to let you win. With that, Emma turned to Michael. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the pain, the betrayal. He had trusted his father. But now, it was clear what had to be done. We take this to the police, Emma said, her words final. It's time to end this once and for all. Gregory and Linda exchanged a brief glance, but Emma could see the shift in their expressions, fear, just for a moment. They knew they were running out of options. But just as Emma reached for her phone to make the call, the door burst open behind them. Emma spun around, startled by the sudden intrusion. A man in a dark suit stood in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Emma. He was tall, with an air of authority that sent a chill down Emma's spine. His presence alone seemed to alter the dynamic in the room. Miss Carter, the man said, his voice smooth, but carrying a certain weight. I'm afraid things aren't as simple as you think. The days that followed were a blur of emotions and decisions that seemed to come faster than Emily could process them. Her mind was consumed by the thought of the upcoming legal battle with Alex. The fight for her son's safety was only just beginning, and the reality of what lay ahead hit her harder than she could have anticipated. She knew Alex was ruthless, but now she saw just how far he was willing to go. He would use anything, everything, to tear their lives apart again. But Emily was done running. Every morning, she would sit at the kitchen table, sorting through the paperwork her lawyer had requested. Medical records, old police reports, text messages, and photographs, all pieces of evidence that painted the full picture of Alex's abusive behavior. Emily had kept everything. Every bruise, every scream, every broken promise. They were her armor now, her shield against the lies Alex was spreading about his rehabilitation. He could not rewrite the past, no matter how hard he tried. As the weeks passed, Emily's resolve only strengthened. She found herself no longer looking over her shoulder in fear, but instead, facing the future with purpose. The truth was on her side. The law was on her side. And most importantly, she had Tommy. Her love for him was the fuel that kept her going, even on the hardest days. The battle was slow and grueling. Alex's lawyer used every tactic they could to discredit Emily, to twist the narrative, to make her appear unstable, paranoid, and unreasonable. They attacked her character, tried to paint her as an unfit mother, all in a desperate attempt to shift the focus away from Alex's own history of violence. But Emily had anticipated it. She had prepared for this. The courtroom was where the truth would come to light. On the day of the final hearing, Emily felt a strange sense of calm. She had spent so many nights replaying the scenarios in her mind, thinking of what Alex might say, how he might try to manipulate the situation. But now, sitting in that cold, sterile courtroom, she knew there was only one person who could speak for her, and that was herself. As the trial progressed, Alex took the stand, his demeanor calm, controlled. He spoke about his rehabilitation, his treatment, and how he had found God during his time in prison. He claimed that he was no longer the man who had abused Emily, that he had changed, and that he was now ready to be a father to Tommy. He looked at Emily with what seemed like sincerity in his eyes, but Emily could see through it. The manipulator was still there, hiding behind the mask. When it was Emily's turn to testify, she took a deep breath and stood up, her hands shaking slightly. She walked to the witness stand with a steady step, and as she sat down, she could feel the weight of the room on her shoulders. She was about to relive some of the darkest moments of her life, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had nothing to hide. The prosecutor asked her to recount the events of the past few years, the abuse she had endured, the broken promises, and the terror she had lived through. She spoke about the bruises, the scars, both physical and emotional. She spoke about Tommy, how Alex's violence had affected him, how she had lived in constant fear for their lives. She spoke about the moment she decided she would leave, the moment she realized she would no longer be a victim. When Emily finished speaking, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. Alex's lawyer tried to counter her testimony, attempting to discredit her by suggesting she was exaggerating, that she was making things up. But Emily didn't back down. She didn't let the words of the defense affect her. She had the truth on her side. The most powerful moment came when Emily looked directly at Alex, her voice clear and unwavering. "You're not the man I married," she said, her gaze never leaving his. "And you'll never be the man I thought you were. You've destroyed everything we had. You don't get to come back into our lives, Alex. Not now. Not ever." Alex flinched, his face momentarily betraying the anger he tried to conceal. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The court had heard the truth, and they couldn't unhear it. The judge took several days to deliberate, but Emily felt in her heart that she had already won. She had spoken the truth, and nothing else mattered. When the ruling finally came, it was in her favor. Alex was granted no visitation rights, and he was ordered to undergo further psychological evaluation before he could even be considered for supervised visitation in the future. It wasn't just a victory for her, it was a victory for Tommy. It was the end of Alex's hold on their lives. It was the beginning of something new. The moment the ruling was read aloud, Emily felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her chest. The relief was overwhelming, almost suffocating. She could breathe again. She could finally look forward to a future without fear. As she walked out of the courthouse, the sunlight hit her face like a warm embrace. The world felt different, new, even. She wasn't walking in the shadow of Alex anymore. She was walking toward her future, with Tommy at her side and the love of her 3 loyal dogs surrounding her. Tommy ran to her as soon as they stepped out into the fresh air. "Mom! You did it!" His voice was full of excitement, his face beaming with the joy of knowing that their lives were about to change forever. Emily knelt down and hugged him tightly. "We did it, Tommy. We're free." Shadow, Pearl, and Rust bounded up to them, their tails wagging furiously, as if they knew that the battle had been won. They had been by her side through every step of this journey, her constant companions, her silent heroes. Emily knew that without them, without their love and loyalty, she might not have had the strength to keep fighting. As they walked back to their car, Emily looked at Tommy, at the future she was about to build for him, for herself. The road ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: she was ready. No matter what challenges came their way, she would face them head-on. Because she had learned, through pain and perseverance, that she was stronger than she had ever known. And for the first time in a long time, Emily could finally say, without hesitation, that she was free. If you liked this story and want more content like this, leave a like, share it with someone you know will be moved by it, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Together, we will explore inspiring stories and moments that touch the heart. Until the next video.